Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, it's time to talk about ADP, and I know we've talked about ADP a bunch recently. But you see, there has been a very important and potentially groundbreaking change since we last talked about ADP. And let's not bury the lead, let's get right into it. The lovely folks over at Limitless TCG, they have been very much amongst the front runners in terms of setting up and running these online tournaments with the whole pandemic thing rolling around. They have gone and banned Arceus and Dialga and Palkia from their tournaments. Now, bearing in mind these are not official tournaments, these are just fan-run events, but they are amongst the biggest and the most visible. So you know what? The fact that Limitless have gone and banned ADP for their tournaments, this really interests me, because I now have two questions which I think are extremely important. Question number one, are other people going to be following suit here? Will other unofficial online tournaments start banning ADP? And secondly, and this is a question that really interests me, could we get anywhere with this? Like, if Limitless goes and bans ADP, and then Hexter, another quite popular online series, goes and bans ADP, and then all of the others start doing it, if the community as a whole bans ADP from online tournaments, bearing in mind that at the moment, outside of the Players' Cup, all we really have is community-run online tournaments, could we actually see Pokemon banning a card because the community have? Could the community getting rid of Arceus and Dialga and Palkia force the Pokemon Company's hand into banning this card? Now, my inkling off the bat is no. I don't think they would. But you've got to admit, if enough online tournaments ban it, to the point where the Players' Cup is allowing ADP, but all of the other online tournaments aren't, and all the practice tournaments that people are using to prepare for the Players' Cup aren't allowing it, you've got to think at some point Pokemon would have to have a serious discussion about whether or not ADP could be allowed to carry on. And this is what's really interesting to me. ADP being banned in Limitless tournaments is kind of interesting, and it's cool, and it's the first time it's happened and all of that. But it's the fallout from this, and it's going to take time to realize exactly what this fallout is. But it's the fallout from this, which is really, really interesting to me. Whether this is going to lead a bunch of other people, and maybe even Pokemon themselves, to go, you know what? Maybe this is a little bit of a problem. Now, here's what Limitless said. Starting January 2021, Arceus and Dialga and Palkia ADP will be temporarily banned from all standard format Limitless online series tournaments. We are going to closely monitor player feedback and the state of the metagame during the first month of the suspension, and then decide whether to apply it to tournaments beyond that duration as well. It goes on, ADP is not unbeatable, and its win rate in tournaments has been only slightly above 50%, so this is not strictly a balancing issue. Even though it isn't drastically more successful than other top decks currently or historically, we believe there are multiple reasons why removing ADP could improve the standard format experience. And this is what I love about this, because I have been on this train for a little while now, and I have been, shall we say, not always agreed with. ADP is the best deck in the format. Now, you can make a very strong argument for Pikachu and Zekrom, and honestly, Pikachu and Zekrom might be the best deck in the format, but I think we've at least got to acknowledge that these are the two. I don't think there is a third that we can really put up in the same tier as those two. And it is the most played deck. And that is acknowledged by Limitless. They say that it is basically taking up at times 50% of the metagame. I showed you, I think just yesterday, the Japanese metagame, and 18.6% of all of these decks are ADP. Although interesting to note that 14.2% are Eternatus, and then 8.4% is Blacephalon. It really is bringing up the rear. But it is by far the most played deck. But it didn't win the Players' Cup 1, it didn't win the Players' Cup 2, and it didn't win that POG, that big online tournament we had, and it didn't win the only international championships that we actually had in 2020, and it didn't win the only big Champions League that Japan had. So the bigger tournaments haven't been taken down by ADP. But the obvious counter-argument when I say that is, yeah, but it's always been the most played deck, and it's everywhere, and it's dominating top cut, even if it's not actually winning the tournaments, and that is a completely fair point with which I can only agree. So if ADP isn't necessarily winning everything, and it is not winning in the same way that Gardevoir Gallade was back in the day, like Darkrai was back in the day, it is not winning with the same regularity as those cards, so why is it being banned? If it is not dominating every tournament, winning every tournament, if there are plenty of other viable decks, and to be clear, there are plenty of other viable decks. Right now, Eternatus, I showed you, is the second most played deck in Japan, not that far behind it. That's a very good deck. Pikachu and Zekrom won the Players' Cup 2, and it won POG, and has proven to be a very, very good, very viable deck. I mean, those are the two big contenders, but then you've got plenty of other things like Centiskorch, which has proven to be a very good deck, Zacian with Lucario and Melmetal rather than ADP, which has proven to be a very good deck. Blacephalon, third highest played deck in Japan, clearly proven to be a very good deck. Why are we banning it? And the answer basically is, it's no fun. And if you've played with or against Arceus and Dialga and Palkia lately, you will have realised that that deck is no fun. And I can use the example of Excadrill because that's the deck I'm playing lately. I promise you, I play so many decks. I try every deck. I play with every deck out there. Every new metagame deck I try. Now Pokemon have hooked me up with a demo account. It's so easy. And I really do play all the decks. But I just don't enjoy playing anything as much as Excadrill. And I believe I've gotten to the point where if it sets up, and it's a stage 1 deck, so it's inherently slightly less consistent, I feel confident about every matchup except ADP, which basically means I should start entering these Limitless tournaments, right? But here's the thing. Excadrill hits for 120 damage. So if ADP uses their GX attack, I'm out. I should have told you what it does. I'm assuming you all know by now, but it's got a GX attack that means you take an extra prize every time you take a KO, and you do an extra 30 damage with every attack. And the way the game goes is this. When my opponent's ADP uses Altered Creation GX, I have to KO them now, or I lose the game. The only other alternative is my opponent benches 3 little Pokemon like Dedenne, Crobat, Mawile, all of which see play in ADP decks, more on Mawile in a moment. And then I can gust up 3 of them, and I play a bunch of gusting. I play Boss's Orders, many of them, several Powpad. I play Great Catcher. I really do go overboard on gusting because that's basically my only win condition. But if my opponent doesn't bench 3 little Pokemon, and I do not KO ADP after they use a GX attack, I will not win that game. Because they use Altered Creation, I don't take a KO. They then use Ultimate Ray, gets a KO while accelerating energy, and then they are 2 turns away from winning. There is no way I can do that, and I will lose. You have to play something like Blacephalon, because Blacephalon's Fireball Circus can get a 1-hit KO on ADP. I mean, you need 6 fire energy in hand and 3 attached to Blacephalon using a welder, but it's doable, it can be done, and that is one of the reasons why Blacephalon is still hanging around, because they can just use GX attack and then you KO them, and that's how you win. Because if you KO them after the GX attack and then get 2 more KOs in a row, you will win the game. One of the reasons Eternatus is seeing so much play is because Dread End does 30 damage for each of your Darkness Pokemon in play, and you can have 8 bench Pokemon. So you do 270. You also play Galarian Zigzagoon to drop 1 damage counter, and again, they GX attack, you KO them, and you're probably going to win the game. But here's the thing. Even in those matchups, if you KO ADP just when they use a GX attack, you've probably won. because it's really hard for them to get enough energy on their Zacian, etc., to keep attacking turn after turn. Now, if you don't, all they're going to do is boss his orders to your Crobat and they will win the game. Against Blacephalon, they can boss his orders. I mean, you're probably playing Oricorio as well, so an Oricorio and a Crobat or something like that. Because that's the other thing. You've got all of these little 2-prize Pokemon, but ADP turns them into 3-prize Pokemon, and they're in range of Ultimate Ray after you've used your GX attack, and they accelerate energy doing so, and if they can Ultimate Ray once, they basically don't lose. Because they take 3 prizes off a support Pokemon while building up their Zacian, which not for nothing is now hitting 260, and it's so hard to come back from that. And this is generally how a lot of the games with or against ADP go. Did they get the early GX attack and then take the first KO? If they did, they're going to win. Did you get a KO on them before or immediately after using a GX attack? If so, you're probably going to win. Most games that I play against ADP, I know in the first 2 turns if I'm going to win or not. If I'm playing Eternatus, which is my favourite proper deck at the moment, if I can get my full bench and Galarian Zigzagoon and I can get a KO on ADP, they basically can't come back from it. Yeah, fine, Zacian can take a KO on a bench Pokemon, but it can't KO Eternatus, and then I'm just going to KO Zacian, and then I'm 1 prize away from winning. So it's almost unlosable. But if they use a GX attack and then they Ultimate Ray onto a Crobat, putting energy onto their Zacian, and then they're 1 boss's orders away from winning the game, I know I've lost that game. Escadrille, I mean, honestly, it's doable. I play both Martial Arts Dojo and Vitality Band. So if I've got both of those out, I hit 140. And if I can hit 140, then they GX attack, I hit 140 again, then I've got a chance. But that's what it takes. And of course, a lot of the time they play Big Charm, which will put them out of range, well, of a lot of stuff, including Eternatus, although you can use extra Galarian Zigzagoon / Scoop Up Net, and that will actually do it, and it puts them out of 2-hit KO range of Excadrill. So what we end up doing, and you've seen this if you've been playing the game lately, we end up playing Crushing Hammer. And what Crushing Hammer does on a coin flip is removes an energy from one of your opponent's Pokemon. So what you essentially do here is they attach an energy to use their GX attack, you hammer it off. Incidentally, Crushing Hammer is also super useful against Pikachu and Zekrom and Eternatus, so it's good in that regard. But it is a coin flip. And the thing is, even when you flip heads, they play Metal Saucer and they play Energy Switch. So if they Metal Saucer an energy, Metal Energy from the discard onto a Zacian, and then play an Energy Switch, and then attach a Water Energy, they can get all the energy up in 1 turn, and then you still don't get an opportunity to stop their GX attack. But even then, it's still flippy. So it still might not work if you flip heads, but even if it does work, you've got to flip heads. And then we end up playing lots of Crushing Hammer. So games against Eternatus, can I flip a heads? Games against Pikachu and Zekrom, can I flip a heads? Games against ADP, can I flip a heads? Does banning ADP get rid of Crushing Hammer? I don't know. Does it make Crushing Hammer a lot less metagame relevant? Oh my goodness, it does. Because the best thing that Crushing Hammer does is give you a chance of stopping your opponent's GX attack. And with ADP gone, do we even want to play it anymore? And this is the issue with ADP. You get games which are decided in the first turn or 2 based on did they GX and did they Ultimate Ray. And then you've got, well, the best counter I've got is probably Crushing Hammer, and now everyone just plays Crushing Hammer. It's not like you can hit for weakness. It's weak to Fairy, and there are 2 problems with that. Number 1, we haven't had any Fairy Pokemon in the Sword and Shield block. They've gone away. So the amount of Fairy Pokemon we've got is significantly lower. And problem number 2, even if you did make a good Fairy deck, something like Gardevoir Gallade, for instance, you're still weak to Zacian. So Zacian is going to get a nice easy 1-hit KO on you for 4 prizes, which kinda sucks. And your opponent isn't going to bench 2 ADP against a Gardevoir Gallade deck, So, yeah, fine, you'll take 3 prizes, but where are your other 2 KOs coming from? They're not. It's why nobody plays Gardevoir Sylveon at the moment. I might have called it Gardevoir Gallade. I meant Gardevoir and Sylveon. So the point I'm making here is we don't have a great counter. There are plenty of decks that can beat it. Eternatus can beat it. Pikachu and Zekrom can beat it. Blacephalon can beat it. But not every game. And a lot of the time you're trying to get lucky with Crushing Hammers, or you're trying to have a really good start. You're still talking about very short, uninteresting, potentially luck-based games. And then, of course, I mentioned it earlier, so let's get the call back now. Moreisle. Moreisle's Captivating Wing ability is just like the item card we used to have Captivating Pokepuff, except it's a Pokemon, so it's super easily searched out. And it just lets you look at your opponent's hand and bench any of their Pokemon they want to. But the problem is that, if I'm playing Eternatus, I want to play a Crobat every turn, unless I'm desperate to fill my bench. So I want to play a Crobat to draw some cards, but then I want to hold a Crobat to draw some cards next turn. But my opponent drops Moreisle, forces me to bench my Crobat, and now I don't have those draw cards for next turn. Which is a huge problem. So, it's partly the GX attack, but it's also that they can use Big Charm, that they don't have much of a weakness, that they've got Moreisle, that they force us all to play Crushing Hammers. And it's not that it's winning every tournament, though it is winning a lot of these little online tournaments. And it's not that it's the only viable deck, because it's not. I follow a ridiculous amount of Pokemon TCG people on Twitter, and every weekend I see a bunch of people talking about winning tournaments with ADP, but I also see a bunch of people talking about winning tournaments with Pikachu and Zekrom, etc. But it's because it turns a game very, very short and uninteresting. And to be honest, if you look at the bans that Pokemon have been implementing recently, it is all to do with getting rid of cards that make the game less interesting and less interactive. And that's what we see from ADP. Shout out to Limitless for providing the story. Of course, I will link their full description of what they've done and why they've done it in the description of this video. I am really, really interested to see where this goes. I want to know if this is something that's going to carry on and other people are going to do. And if that's the case, I want to see how Pokemon respond to this. And it may well be that this is a 1-month experiment and nothing ever comes of it, but it might start snowballing from here. But I'd like to know what you think about this, because this is a topic that gets people talking. Although, as always, and I say this every time, but I really do mean it this time, go nuts, but be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.